Welcome to Unstitched ADHD Urban Ed Talks with your host, Dr. Stanley Ekiyor. Today I have an esteemed guest, Mr. Souers. In this episode, we will both explore ADHD as a unique way of thinking, not a flaw, and how that message can empower families, educators, students in urban school settings. We will highlight Ron's coaching experiences, the self-discovery journal for adults with ADHD, and practical tools for everyday support. Mr. Ron Souers, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor, as always, to be asked.
So before we start, our audience will want to know a little bit about you.
I'm Ron Souers, and I have ADHD, and I'm passionate about advocating for ADHD. I'm also affectionately known as your ADHD guy. I'm a strengths coach. So I coach men that are 40 and over who struggle with ADHD, addiction, or depression, and I help them break through isolation to become more pro-social so they can start building stronger, deeper relationships and reclaim their confidence and finally feel seen and supported. It's about unlocking the version of you that's always been there, waiting to connect. If you can't ask for what you need, you'll never get what you truly want.
So what led you to really look at attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD as it's commonly referred to, as a different operating system? What led you to come up with that concept?
Thank you for asking. And I'm not the only one that says that or does that. I'm just like, the thing is, for me, when I got diagnosed with ADHD, it was like equal parts devastating and, equal parts liberating. So I didn't know what it was. My therapist didn't really know whether it was called ADD or ADHD, and like the research that I was doing wasn't a lot that made it clear. All I knew is like that it had depression in it. So after exploration, failures, and almost getting fired from my job for a second time, I, went back to my therapist and took a deeper interest in what is this ADHD and like, what does it really mean? So I read a whole bunch of books, You're Not Broken. Like, I forget exactly some of the books that I read, like right now, of course I have ADHD, but like they really like I started to really connect, like going like, wow, this is why I do the things I do. Like, this makes sense why I'm so impulsive, or this makes sense why like I'm so emotionally dysregulated. So I started to see that more in the light of like, okay, this is my brain. This is how it operates. And I started to look at it from like a strengths perspective. What strengths do I bring to the table? And there's no way I can really change my brain. I've just got to be able to work with it. And honestly, now the more that I've begun to understand about it, and I'm still learning, but like the more that I see it as an advantage and an operating system than just as a disorder. And I often call them like neurological differences, rather than that term disorder just has like, it's something wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with the way that anybody's brain works. We need those differences in order to solve problems, dynamic problems, when we get together and accept those differences and look at those as like, this is just another way to look at the problem that maybe, and find a solution that maybe we didn't see before.
Ron, it's interesting you talked about, the definition of ADHD, being attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, which all points to negativity. I know you're focused on adults, but I want to take us back to your school days when you were in school. What were the challenges? What were the things now that you think if your teachers had that knowledge
Hmm.
would have been more helpful to you?
Definitely. If I was to go back and teach my teachers what would help me to learn, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, the struggles you experienced then,
Yeah,
you
I
know.
definitely didn't understand. I had a difficulty learning and a difficulty paying attention. I definitely remember a time going through school and feeling isolated. I actually had been put in the front of the class because I stood on top of a desk and I thought that would help me make friends, which ended up backfiring and creating a traumatic experience in my life that started to create this identity that I eventually was able to see later on. But one of the things that could have helped, and I've kind of made a list here, is like to establish clear routines, like maybe printed schedules or giving timers for transitions, because a lot of neurodivergents have trouble transitioning between tasks. They can't just jump from one to another. They need time to like be able to understand that, well, this is coming. So if there was like a pre alarm or something that they could have as a reminder of like, okay, the next class is going to be coming. I need to start wrapping up whatever I'm doing here. The next thing that they could do is like teaching self-regulation. So like
Mhm.
that could show up as like mindful breathing or pauses, especially if they see a child that's getting like hyperventilating or running around, and teaching them, hey, look, just can you just breathe, and I'll breathe with you, and just understanding that that child's not there to disrupt the classroom. They a lot of times there's a lot of energy going on inside of these children, and that's the only way they can release it. But they just don't understand that there's other ways. So if you can teach that like simple behavior, or maybe they like grip something and squeeze a ball or get some of that energy out in a different way, teaching them different self-regulation techniques or positive behavior reinforcement. We don't do that enough.
Mhm.
It's about, recognizing when they do something good. They may have missed the assignment, but they tried really hard and wrote a lot. They were supposed to recognizing their effort in other areas. It goes a long way to getting them to feel confident about themselves to do what you think they need to do. Maybe having behavior charts or strengths goals. They get a chart of like, okay, you did good here. So they can see where they're going, and it gives them positive reinforcement for starting to engage in that positive behavior. So it's like a mini reward system. And this is
Mhm.
something else, is like chunking instructions and tasks. So it's like putting tasks together or breaking them apart. That's the more bite sized. So it's like very simple steps. So if you notice one of your students is confused, you can just be like, do you need further clarification on what you need done here? Do you know how to do this first part? Maybe we could break it up into different parts. Like, say they need to write a paper, and
Mhm.
that's something like, how do I even do that? Do I start at the end? Do I do a bunch of research? Maybe just be like, come up with a topic, and an outline, and write a paragraph. Do some research about what you want to
Mhm.
study, and like that, for movement and other opportunities like that, like games, walk and talk. Maybe, I've even heard this on another podcast where they've had classrooms without the desks. So they have
Mhm.
desks in there, but they don't have the formal chair and desks. So it creates this free form, less structured
Mhm.
environment. Like she said, it creates a feeling of being at home or a
Mhm.
feeling of being in a comfortable dojo environment. Or, oh, I have to fit in this structure here. And like I said, fidget tools. And the last thing would be model and focused attention. So, like, model the behavior that you want to see. Like if you need to breathe, or being more open about how you're feeling as a teacher.
Mhm.
Maybe you're frustrated and you express that in a
Mhm.
healthy way. Be like, look, I understand that this is going on. I'm feeling a little frustrated right now. Give me a moment. I'm going to take a breath and come so I can teach you guys better. So that
Mhm.
models that for them, like, wow, if the teacher's doing that and they get overwhelmed, it's okay for me to feel the same way. And this is what you do.
Thank you so much, Rod. You see, there are two areas you were talking about, and I'm like, wow. One is reinforcement strategies, right? People tend to conflict as I relate with people the difference between reinforcement and bribery. Some
Mm-hmm.
people say, oh, no, you're bribing the kids, right? And I've always said, no, there are two different things. We are reinforced.
Yeah.
Reinforcement, what you do to somebody around a behavior that helps that person to recognize that behavior and want to increase more of it, knowing
Yeah.
that it's kind of pleasing, right? So, for instance, you open a door for somebody. Somebody says, "Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you very much." Those are natural rewards, right? You want to continue to do it because you're like, "Whoa, people appreciate it."
Yeah.
While bribery is like giving somebody something to do something. But reinforcement is more of acknowledging and encouraging a behavior so that it can increase in propensity. So I'm happy you pointed that out. And another thing you talked about that I want to highlight is the chunking. Yeah, and it's also known as a tax analysis, breaking it into bits and pieces, right?
Yeah.
So that you can, and I love the way you really break that down and your example about how a classroom was designed. Like I always say, the disability is basically in the environment we have created,
Yes.
right? So if you put things in a certain way and I can't function in that environment, now, of course, I have a problem. And now you say, I am not fit to be in that environment. So what I
Yeah.
hear you say is, why not take into consideration those in the environment and design it in such a way that everybody can function, which
Yeah.
everybody will benefit from. So thank you for bringing that up.
Well, you look at it like an octopus. Like, you don't take an octopus out of the ocean and to thrive on the land. It's all about the environment that you, and minds especially, do not thrive well with, in certain structured environments. So it's like you're
Mhm.
expecting these results without an understanding of, like, well, I see them struggling, and I know they're trying, but it's like, I know they can do this. But some
Mhm.
days it's like a chemical imbalance. So oftentimes it looks like they're lazy because you see them like, oh, they're really good on this day. So I know they can do the work. They're just not trying to do the work. That's not the case. It's more about,
Mhm.
like, they just don't feel like doing the work on that day. They're not motivated.
Mhm.
They don't have, it's just in their mind. That's
Mhm.
harder to do than
Mhm.
anything else in the world.
So let's talk about journal. I know you're big on that. How
Yeah.
can that concept, or how can parents and teachers benefit from that in supporting kids with ADHD?
So with my journal,
Yes.
yeah, definitely. It's probably more for the parents because the questions are very deep, but I'm sure that children can use it. But one of the questions, what does emotional safety mean to me? It's about exploring, like, what that means. What is emotional safety? And for me, doing the work, like, emotional safety is I feel okay to express my emotions in that situation, no matter what they are, whether that's depression, or anger, or sadness, or whatever emotion comes up. And when have I experienced it? So it's like you've got to see it for yourself before you start doing the work. You got to know what safety and emotional is for a kid. Maybe they would have to talk to a parent about what that means. I feel like if the parent goes through it first, they can start to understand their children better, so they can offer and be that role model, especially for emotional safety or any type of growth development.
So if there's a parent out there right now listening
Yeah.
and wants to get access or get more explanation, journaling, the way you have designed it, what it means, and how to access or use it, what would you say to that? How can they get to you to be able to utilize that?
Yeah, they can reach out to my email. I highly encourage that, that type of feedback, because I want to make, more journals like this that have, better instructions, better, advice. And, and it's mainly in the beginning too, is like, this is a journal of discovery of who you really are, that wonderful and amazing you that has been buried or locked away. It is personal and it gets rather deep. It's a safe place to open up. This is a process that takes time. And sometimes you got to take breaks, and there's no like set point where you got to like get through the journal, or even if you get through the journal that's like, it's the work is done. This is just a doorway to open up, those questions. You talk and have a place to rewrite and revisit those questions later, because you're at a different point on your journey. It's about asking the right questions, and maybe if you have some suggestions that would help, I'm all ears. I love it.
So, can you state your email for those listening, how they can reach you if they needed to?
Yeah, you can reach my email. It's snowball period pro 81 at gmail.com. Oh, that's actually my personal email. So put self-discovery journal in the
Subject.
title or the subject.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'll try to help you as best as I can. And
Yes.
if you really
'Cause I
want to
think
have a one-on-one conversation, I have my free discovery call. So we can talk about it there. Talk about it if you want to explore coaching with me, and that's at youradhdguy.com.
good. Thank you very much for sharing that. I know I have had extensive conversations with you about it, and I'm really fascinated with what you have put into this. And so I thank you very much for sharing it. And I know most of our audience will reach out to you. Now, let's come to schools.
Thank you.
How do you think? I know you have stated strategies that can help students in the classroom. You've made that very explicit. But when we talk about confidence, because we know that's one struggle, because most people see ADHD as a stigma. They don't want to talk about it. They feel they are less than, especially when the definition of it is a deficit, it's a disorder. So it bothers their self-esteem. What would be your suggestion? How can schools help students, with ADHD to build confidence and be motivated in the learning environment?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I definitely feel, and I've heard this on other podcasts, if you could throw out everything else and keep 2 or 3 courses, I feel like those would be emotional intelligence, self-advocacy, and financial planning. Especially with the emotional intelligence, because the teachers got to learn how to express their emotions and what that looks like in a healthy way, and also self-advocacy, which all leads back to what I coach, is how to be more pro-social, teaching kids how to feel comfortable talking about their struggles, passions, if they're depressed, or even if they're, you know, have suicidal ideation. Those things need to be talked about, because the more that you keep it to yourself, the greater weight it is on you, and you feel like you can't talk to anybody about it. And I'm not suggesting that you talk to necessarily everybody about it, because not everybody's in a place to do that. But there needs to be a place where they can talk about it. And the more teachers that understand this and embody that, the more these students will actually progress and grow.
Let's talk about boys of color. Based on my experience, most times when you go to most schools
Mm-hmm.
and you see kids classified, especially in urban schools, I agree majority of urban schools are students of color, but it's mostly
Mm-hmm.
boys of color that you see in that environment, right? How does ADHD connect to identity? And we can also talk about masculinity and mental health, especially for these kids. How do you think that squares with these different issues when it comes to boys of color?
Yeah, and I appreciate you asking me that question. I would just want to preface that I'm not an expert in
Mhm.
this. This is just my understanding and my experience. And obviously, I wouldn't know what it's like to be a boy of color, but I've done a lot of research in that area, in trying to understand like that, how that lens of ADHD presents, because there's not just the stigma of ADHD there's the stigma of color and identity through that, um,
Mhm.
which needs to be explored more, because there's a lot to unpack there. And,
Mhm.
because oftentimes the ADHD becomes like intertwined with who they are. Because so you have these rowdy, rambunctious black kids running around, causing trouble, and they're automatically, that's just their culture. That just becomes part of their culture. And I feel like somewhere along the point, they felt like that is their culture. So it's like, instead of getting the diagnosis that they need, that they have ADHD, and this is the reason why they're running around or can't sit still or causing trouble, because, they feel like that's who they are. And there's something deeper there, and they can't get the help as readily as somebody else, the stereotype, which is just a naughty white boy running
Mhm.
around. Like,
Mhm.
it's crazy. And then on top of it, when it comes to medication and getting the medication, because it's a highly regulated medication, so because of that identity from coming from being drug dealers or gangbangers, um, they don't get the access to that same help from that medication, because they feel like they're just going to abuse it or they're just going to sell it. It's unfair. It's something that needs to change, because these
Mhm.
people are human beings that need help and can contribute to society in so much of a better way once they get that help. So like
Mhm.
understanding that from like that self advocacy point of view, like
Mhm.
that's where I feel like it needs to come from. But if teachers could come in and see that and start to give them maybe a little bit of extra care, because, you know, they don't get it anywhere else, can go such a long way to help.
Mhm. I just want you to know that it's about your experience, your lived experience. I truly appreciate you bringing that and talking about that in such a way. Now, people are talking about back to school shopping and all that, right?
Yeah.
If a teacher were to come to you now and say, how do I prepare if I find out I have a kid in my classroom that has ADHD? What would you say to that teacher? What will be one thing or two that you say to that educator to create not just awareness, but put them in the right frame of mind to see the
Mhm.
strengths rather than the deficits.
Yeah, definitely. I'll take one strength that you can use is curiosity and perspective. So you come into it with, okay, I may not, just believe that whatever they're telling you they're struggling with is what they're actually struggling with. And just be open to figuring out the best way to approach that and being a little more flexible, giving them a list of things that they can do and then having them choose what they would like to do. Telling them, hey, this has to be done by this time and you got to do it this way. Maybe giving them a little more autonomy when it comes to like what they're doing. And, like I understand that you want to have a fairness and you have other kids maybe asking like, well, he doesn't, and just explaining that, look, we all have our different ways of doing things. Try to look at their strengths, what they're doing. They may not be able to focus, but when they do, they're showing perseverance because they keep showing up. Though it's hard and they're not getting a lot of support or even recognition or positive feedback, but they're still showing up. Imagine, try to empathize with what that might feel like, and I feel like that goes a long way. Put yourself in their shoes.
One last question I'll ask you. Most times when we talk about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or what most people refer to as ADHD, to so many people is an abstract. They hear it, but they really can't grasp that concept. So, do you have a story, you know, that you can tell that can bring to life some experience, with either somebody who you've met or your own experience that can make people understand that it's real? Research has proven that it's real and there's support out there, and great things can come from kids with ADHD. Great things if we provide the right tools and people are aware of how to support them. Is there a story that can readily come to your mind for you to share with our audience?
Sure. So it's one of my coworkers, I would say. He's often described as lazy. I've seen it and and I know that he has ADHD, but sometimes he has trouble, expressing certain things. Even I've been like, well, this guy's lacking motivation. I've seen him work hard. I've seen him be motivated. I've seen him show up and do things. And then other days he's like, he's not, it's a difference. So he was able to tell me, about that he finally got his medication, Adderall. And he was talking about how it helps him do the work. It helps to quiet the noise inside of his head. I've noticed he's more focused and showing up. So what I've done for me is self-regulation. Like my perspective is like, okay, wow. Yeah, he's showing up. The thing about it is they're not doing those things because they just can't do them physically. They just rather put their hand in a in a garbage disposal than do the things that they honestly would feel bad about not doing because they can't show up. But with that medication, he's able to show up. And there's so many people that don't know what ADHD, that it's even real, that there are almost 1 billion people throughout the world that have a neurodivergency. That's like 1/7 of the world. That's a crazy amount for people to not even know what that looks like and how that shows up. It is incredibly negligent. This information isn't out there, especially for our children that are our future. For us to just be like, well, this kid's just not worth looking into to figure out what's going on. It doesn't take a lot. It's just that basic understanding of like, we all have different brains. We have different fingerprints. Like, we all have a unique fingerprint for, the skin on our hands. How much different can our brain be versus the skin. Our brain is so much more complex, and to put that into perspective is like the scientists don't know how the brain operate. Period.
Mhm.
How are they going to know how an ADHD mind operates? And there's a lot and it has to go back to like it goes beyond the DNA, and it goes beyond the tests and whatever else. Like you have to go into the actual experience of that
Mhm.
person, because it's all
Mhm.
different.
Yeah,
That understanding
individualized.
there. If you can wrap your mind around that type of thing, I feel we can really make progress in understanding each other and coming up with
Mhm.
solutions that help everybody.
Ron, I said that was the last question, but you just
That's
said
it.
something I wanted us to just get a little, just briefly, because in most communities, the medication piece is what gets them really uncomfortable with it, right?
Yeah.
So, what would be your own advice from your experience? Not, you're not an expert in medication and, all that, but in your experience, what will be your advice when it comes to that critical point where something has to be done to support a kid with ADHD? At what point would you say, you know what, or what do you think a parent ought to check or do to make sure medication is not the first point of call or medication is just it?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And it's a hot topic for a lot of people. Honestly, from my understanding, and I personally, my symptoms aren't to the extreme point that I needed medication. Um,
Mhm.
I'm fortunate to have that. So I don't have a lot of experience with ADHD medication personally,
Mhm.
but I do know people that seriously need it. But the thing that I would advocate for is like, don't make it the first choice. There's a reason why they don't diagnose kids until after they're 6 years old, because
Mhm.
you don't know if this is just a phase or if this is the actual thing. And you don't
Mhm.
want to start medicating 6-year-olds. Like
Mhm.
that's just that's not a good practice. Like you want
Yes.
to figure out like, okay, let's try these things. Um, let's try journaling for a little bit. Let's try getting your thoughts out. Let's try going over here, and trying something first before you go to medication. And if that doesn't
Mhm.
work, then explore that. But that shouldn't be, it's a very small percentage of people that just need medication to regulate.
Mhm.
And that's where it should be. And the end goal should be to develop systems and techniques that can take you away from that medication so you can slowly get off that medication and live
Mhm.
your life in a holistic way that doesn't have side effects, because there's
Mhm.
stuff like mindfulness
Mhm.
that reorganizes your brain to a
Mhm.
point that you can have better focus and get better with impulsivity and emotional dysregulation and other symptoms of ADHD.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, because I've always said, parents, before you start thinking about what to do, make sure you're talking to an expert. You can start with your primary care provider. If you're seeing certain things that is impeding the kid's ability to function in school and at home, talk to your primary care provider and they will follow the process and help you figure out if it's actually ADHD. Because there are certain characteristics of ADHD that, if you're not careful, you can confuse
Oh,
for kids that have trauma. Some of the characteristics of kids responding to trauma can look like ADHD. That's why we say
yeah.
make sure you go to the expert and it's done properly. If somebody says medication, you want to know why, you want to ask for other options. Of course, there are those who need it, and research has shown it works for, but not just everybody
Yeah,
goes all
definitely.
out to get medication. So I like that clarification.
It's about like, because the treatment for ADHD is going to be different from autism when PTSD
Mm-hmm.
and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be
Yes.
absolutely, so you don't want to have somebody
Yes.
that's whipping the pencil on a prescription right away. You want to stay away from
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners, those who have tuned in today. You've been
Yeah,
listening
thanks.
to Mr. Ron Sayers. He's doing so much in this area. And I would advise, yeah, reach out to him, try to figure out, because it's not just somebody talking about something as an expert. Lived experience for me is very important. And
Mhm.
Ron has lived it. He knows what he's talking about. So reach out to the strategies that has helped him to be this successful, right? And see how you can benefit from that. So thank you for tuning in to Unstitching ADHD, where we try to stitch one episode at a time. And please don't stop the conversation. Keep talking about it. Awareness is key. The more people get to know about it, the more educators get to know about it, not just know the definition, but understand what it truly looks like and feels like. The better they can support the kids. There are strategies out there that can support kids, things that work for ADHD kids, like Ron just
Yes.
enumerated most of those things. Movement breaks, chunking. Chunking wasn't really designed for just ADHD kids. It's good teaching
Mhm.
practice. That's how we teach. When we talk about behavior, are we looking at behavior from the lens of inappropriate behavior? I always say behavior is an umbrella. You
Yeah.
teach appropriate behavior so that inappropriate behavior will go off the screen. If you don't teach kids how to behave, they will behave the way they think is appropriate. Behavior is about teaching. You can't exclude behavior from instruction. Let's create environments that are inclusive, welcoming for all kids. Thank you for all you
Definitely.
do, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Please don't forget to subscribe. Chances are every new episode will help you keep in touch with what we are saying, because we'll continue to bring people who have lived it, those trained to talk about it, and help us to unravel the complexities of ADHD. Thank you and have a beautiful day. Ron, thank you for what you do and thank you for being here.
Yeah.
We look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, and if you want to reach out to me, I'm offering a free discovery call. We can figure out exactly how we can work together, if we're a good fit. If this stuff resonated with you, you can find that at youradhdguy.com. I'm also giving away a free copy of my self-discovery, an electronic version of that. That's also on youradhdguy.com at the top. And yeah, if you want more tips, or you can always check out my podcast, Don't Mind Me. I Just Have ADHD, on your favorite platform. And thank you. Thank you, Stanley, for what you do. We need it.
Thank you, Ron. Yeah, thank you and appreciate you. And we are honored to have you here today.
Yeah, you too.